But for him, it gave him the energy to do crazy things every day. Babe walked unhurriedly down the walkway under the stands. This zone was quite dark, and not as crowded as the outside was. Only drivers and staff could pass, therefore. He felt more comfortable than being in a field full of people who were just watching. His body was so sensitive to everything, and it was making him tired more easily than usual, even though he didn't do anything more than anyone else. While he walked, his slender hand picked up the phone and looked at it, moving his finger to scroll blankly on the screen. Right now, his concentration wasn't focused on what was on the phone, but the strange feeling behind him. He heard footsteps, breathing, and the rustling of clothes. He could feel his body temperature and a certain mass of sensation that had been following him for a while now. But the strange thing was that he couldn't smell anything. It was just a few meters before he got to the exit of the amphitheater, and he thought that if the person intended to follow him, there was no way he would let him walk to the door. If he let it be, the final result probably wouldn't be very good. Open first has an advantage. Today, he would adhere to that motto. Phew! Thump! Ouch! A cry of pain rang out when the famous racer suddenly turned around and grabbed the arm of the pervert who was following him and threw him with all his might until he lay on the ground, and when he saw that the other party was in a disadvantageous position, Babe immediately went up to sit on top of the pervert to prevent him from being able to stand up and retaliate against him. Only staff are allowed in here, Babe said quietly, staring at the suspect wearing a black cap and matching mouth mask. Plus, there were eyeglasses as well. No matter how pretty he looked, he deliberately covered his face. How did you get in? The pervert refused to answer and just lay there as if he didn't know what to do next. His attitude made Babe think that this guy must have been a shoddy amateur who just wanted to go after a famous person because he just threw him all at once and fell silent, didn't respond to anything at all. He trembled as if he was afraid of Babe. If you came after others, why was he afraid? I'm asking nicely, so why are you not answering? Babe kept his voice low, purposely forcing the ant-hearted giant to open his mouth and say something. Or do you want me to ask another question? All right, I'm not stuck anymore. Sorry. Even the way he responded was not as good as he had thought. The guy opened his mouth and spoke without even waiting for him to do something more drastic. Seeing this made Babe even more confused as to how someone so cowardly could think of daring to come after him. While he kept wondering, his slender hand then reached out and pulled off the giant's hat, and at the same time, pulled off the mask covering his mouth to see clearly who the person who thought of doing something like this was and where they came from. But the results didn't help much, because even though he could see his face, it didn't make him know much. He had never known or met this person before. Or did they ever have an encounter? Babe stared thoughtfully at the boy with glasses and tried to remember where he had seen. Suddenly, it hit him. That's... You were on the stand just now, right? Babe interrupted before the accused could say anything. The question caused the tall figure to furrow his brow in surprise, and the eyes behind the glasses widened like he had seen a ghost. When he heard the next sentence, stand A, top, right side. That's where you were, right? True. Babe was slightly startled when the accused person who had been lying there shaking suddenly sprung up and looked wide awake, causing him to sit on top of him. He had to get up quickly because if he continued to sit in that position, it might become even more strange. What do you want? The famous racer asked with a confused look on his face. The stranger suddenly became excited because Babe could tell where he sat earlier. It's true when they said you have 100 eyes. Huh? You can see everything. You have 100 eyes. Me? I have 100 eyes? From the beginning, Babe thought the boy was going to say something serious, but now he was beginning to think the staff must have accidentally let this young fan in. What kind of idiot would say that other people have 100 eyes with such excited expressions? How could you see where I was sitting? Babe took a step back. This reminded him of the times when young children's fans stood up and rushed towards him with expressions like they had seen a famous star wearing a superhero costume? Babe didn't know how to answer that question at the moment. His senses were many times faster than anyone else's. He could see things that others didn't notice and could recognize them in incredible ways. He smells things that other people don't, and recognizes very soft, complex, and detailed sounds. He can distinguish a lot of flavors and is very sensitive to touch to the point where Wei even once called these abilities characteristics of superheroes, but for him, it was just an annoyance that made life difficult. "It's my business." And that was Babe's final answer. He answered in a calm voice before shaking his head lightly, as if he had just realized he accidentally wasted his time on an unimportant matter. This kid was just an ignorant fan, and there wasn't anything as scary about him. "Leave now before I call the guards to drag you away." After saying that, Babe immediately made a move to walk away, but was held back by the young man who grabbed his arm. The other person had a brave expression like he wanted to say something, but was still hesitating whether to say it or not. "What else?" Babe shouted as he was starting to get annoyed. "What's wrong with this, you? If you're a fan, you probably know I don't have a lot of patience, so why don't you stop irritating me already?" Even though he gave the kid a threatening stare, he still wouldn't speak, and just stood there shaking. "Ah, if you don't talk, I'm going to call the guards." "No, wait. Then what the hell do you want? Why are you afraid and can't speak? I haven't done anything to you yet." Babe let out in annoyance, seeming to be so irritated that they had forgotten that he had just thrown someone else on the ground with all their strength. "I don't have time to play with you all day. I'm going to sleep. Can you help me join the team?" Babe frowned from the first moment he heard that strange sentence. The giant child seemed to use all his courage to say it, but Babe could only think in his heart, "Would you rather use your courage to do something else?" "Does my face look like a recruiter's?" Babe pointed a finger at his face with an expression of complete incomprehension. "If you want to join, go apply to that team. Don't fucking come to me." "I have already applied many times already," the tall young man stammered. The more he got scolded, the more felt even more nervous than he already was. But if he did not say it now, he was afraid he wouldn't have the chance again. "But they sent me back, not allowing me to test drive." The senior racer tilted his head in surprise when he heard that. "Did you not pass the qualifications?" "I was told if I want to take the exam, I should go get a car." "That's it. They gave you a test. You bring the car." "I don't have a car." Babe clutched his temples when he heard that answer. He looked like he was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. From the beginning, he thought meeting strange fans was pointless enough, but now he was standing and talking to a crazy kid from somewhere who wanted to apply for a racing team, but didn't have a car for himself. "Go rent one outside. They have cars for rent." Babe waved his hand with a tired expression on his face. "I already asked, but was told if you don't belong to a team, you can't rent them." The strange boy answered with an innocent face. It looked so sincere that Babe thought it couldn't be a joke, even though it looked like it. "Then what do you want me to do?" Babe asked, still not understanding why he was telling this story to someone who never knew him as he did. "If you don't have a car, how will you race? And how do you know you can drive?" "I'm sure I can drive." Confidence means, "Can I borrow your car?" The more they talked, the more Babe's headache intensified. "Do you think my car is worth 2 bahts? You suddenly came to ask to borrow something this expensive?" Babe lowered his voice, wanting the other party to know his seriousness and let this kid realize he was not a playmate. "I know it's expensive, but right now I don't have any money," the young man said, with an expression like a child trying to ask his mother for money to buy a robot. The expression of being both afraid and wanting was funny in Babe's eyes, but that was no reason for him to lend him his car. "But I want to join your team. You can let me do anything. I can do it all." "Why do you want to join my team?" "Because I want to be like you." This time, the tall boy's eyesight and tone seemed different. Of course, that fear hasn't completely disappeared, But when he said that sentence, Babe sensed the ambition. I want to be a king that everyone accepts like you. Others said that I want to be like you. I have to join your team. And if I want to be king, I only have to drive your car. Babe couldn't help but laugh because of that strange answer. He didn't understand what this kid was babbling about, but it looked amusing. What do you know? Said the senior racer, still laughing at the sight of the stupid, clueless kid. Anyone who says they want to be like me has to do things like me. And I'll be teaching you to be a loser? Do you want to be a loser? The big eyes behind the glasses seemed to tremble slightly at those words from the person who was known as his role model. He thought that what Babe said was right, but he didn't know why in his heart he still didn't want to give up on his first intention easily. If following you is called being a loser, then I'm a loser. The answer, accompanied by the kid's determined look, surprised Babe. He thought it was crazy for the boy to obey everything he said. This kid had a mind of his own. So? Babe just chuckled. I know I will never be able to do it like you do. Even if I follow you every step of the way, I probably won't be able to do it. But I want to do it. Babe suddenly felt like it was fun. He had no idea why this kid seemed so focused and obsessed with his business, and he didn't care if it looked strange to other people. He believed every person had something that was preoccupied in their hearts, and it depended on what it was or whose story it was. Therefore, it was not strange to him. On the contrary, it still looked very interesting. Besides, his life in this period was starting to feel boring and needed some entertainment. Finding something unusual to do wouldn't be a bad thing, right? What's your name? Babe asked softly. Meanwhile, the other person had a blank expression on his face, as if he didn't expect to be asked that question by the senior racer. Yes? What is your name? Babe repeated impatiently. Oh, my name! The young man looked like he had just understood the question by repeating it. My name is Charlie. Babe nodded slightly, before smiling and slowly taking a step closer to the tall boy. His slender hand slowly raised to caress Charlie's jawline as he carefully examined the face behind the glasses. He looked like he had a pretty face as well. Even though he looked a bit dulled because of his timidity and unsure attitude, but he couldn't deny it was interesting. Are you an alpha? The famous racer asked, running his palms down Charlie's neck and chest. Yes, yes. Good. Babe's voice sounded different from the beginning, which made Charlie uncontrollably get goosebumps. Babe's attitude made him not even dare to move. You said that if I gave you a car and then took you to the team, you'd accept everything, right? Yes, I can do it all. Then I can help you. Really? Charlie's eyes widened in excitement, but he seemed more excited about Babe squeezing his chin sharply to tell him to calm down before he got annoyed again. But I'll help you only if I'm sure you'll be useful to me.